Stopping a 20-ton supersonic jet on a short stretch of steel requires absorbing massive amounts of kinetic energy in seconds. It is one of the most violent mechanical actions in modern aviation. Yet for decades, several navies executed this exact maneuver on ship hulls originally laid down in 1942 as emergency stopgap measures. These ships were the United Kingdom's 1942 design light fleet carriers. Because military shipyards were overworked during the war, the Royal Navy contracted civilian yards to build them using standard mercantile shipping specifications. To accelerate production, engineers stripped out heavy armor and redundant backup systems, prioritizing internal volume over combat protection. The Admiralty accepted these vulnerabilities because they classified the light fleet as disposable warships with an expected service life of just 3 years. Instead, the final active ship of this design was decommissioned in 2001. We will analyze how this austere, unarmored engineering created a flexible platform that became the primary carrier for 8 different naval forces across half a century. The structural compromises made to accelerate wartime production became the specific features required to survive the transition to the jet age. In 1941, the Allies faced a crisis. They required air cover to protect convoys from U-boats, but lacked the military shipyard capacity to build heavy fleet carriers. The solution was to scale down the existing illustrious cross-fleet carrier design so it could be assembled in civilian yards, adhering to Lloyd's merchant shipping rules rather than strict military codes. This wireframe illustrates the Colossus class. Omitting the heavy armored box yielded a massive single hangar measuring 445 by 52 feet. To compensate for lacking armor, engineers built improved watertight subdivisions into the lower decks to isolate flooding. The hangar also featured a 17.5 vertical clearance. This height gave the ships more operational flexibility to store diverse aircraft types than the dual-level hangars found on bespoke fleet carriers. This immense space was originally designed to pack in dozens of piston-engine aircraft, like Fairey Barracuda torpedo bombers and Supermarine sea firefighters. By abandoning thick steel plating in favor of raw spatial volume, the Royal Navy accidentally handed future engineers an empty, adaptable structural canvas. By the late stages of World War II, piston aircraft were evolving rapidly. Their increasing weight and landing speeds quickly approached the structural limits of the original Colossus specifications. In response, the Admiralty paused construction on the final 6 hulls of the order, modifying them into a reinforced subclass known as the Majestic class. The schematic compares the Colossus to the new Majestic specifications. Modifications increased displacement by 1,500 tons, and the draft deepened by 1.5 feet. To manage heavier loads, the flight deck was heavily reinforced, and mechanical elevators expanded. The arresting cables strung across the deck also had to be upgraded to absorb the increased kinetic energy of the heavier planes landing at higher velocities. While these mechanical upgrades were strictly intended for advanced piston planes, they established the minimum structural tolerances required for the arrival of jet aircraft. Following the war, naval aviation hit a technological bottleneck: the transition to high-performance jet propulsion. Early military jets posed severe aerodynamic problems. They had higher stall speeds, and their heavy airframes suffered from slow throttle responses when trying to accelerate. Operating these jets on a straight axial flight deck was dangerous. If a pilot missed the arresting wires, their momentum would carry them directly into the parked aircraft at the bow of the ship. This diagram illustrates the first retrofit to solve the crisis: the angled flight deck. This physically altered landing geometry, creating an escape route. If a pilot misses the wire, the pilot safely aborts over the open ocean, avoiding the forward parking area. Launching the aircraft presented a second issue: Jets were too heavy for traditional hydraulic catapults to launch effectively. This led to the second retrofit, Commander C.C. Mitchell's steam catapult. This cross-section shows how engineers solved the power deficit. Instead of relying on hydraulics, they tapped directly into the ship's Admiralty 3 drum boilers, routing high pressure steam up to the catapult track to generate superior launch power. The third retrofit was the optical landing system, or mirror landing aid, which replaced the human landing signal officer. The system used a gyro-stabilized mirror and datum lights to provide a precise glide path, correcting for the pitch of the deck in rough seas. The Australian Majestic-class carrier, HMS Melbourne, was the third carrier globally to be constructed with these features integrated from the start. These three retrofits bridged the physics gap, transforming a 1942 mercantile hull into a fully functioning supersonic jet base. This map highlights how the Royal Navy divested these hulls to 8 nations: the UK, Argentina, Australia, Brazil, Canada, France, India, and the Netherlands. These vessels were active across Cold War theaters, including Korea, Vietnam, the Indo-Pakistani War, and the Falklands. During the 1956 Suez Crisis, 2 Colossus-class ships executed a radical shift in amphibious doctrine. They executed the first ship-based helicopter assault in military history, proving the hull's utility for vertical troop insertion. The U.S. Navy relegated many of its surplus carriers purely to anti-submarine warfare. Foreign navies, however, utilized the light fleet hulls differently. Nations like France, India, and Argentina deployed them as primary power projection tools, operating mixed air groups of fast jet strikes. The Brazilian carrier Minas Gerais remained active until 2001, proving the extreme longevity of the design. By exporting the same modernized hull to 7 different countries, the Royal Navy established a common technical and operational baseline for carrier aviation across 4 continents. The operational timeline of the Light Fleet Carrier Program stretches from the first commissioning in 1944 to the final scrapping of the Indian carrier, Vikrant, in 2014. To understand this longevity, we have to look at the expensive fully armored, bespoke fleet carriers of World War II, like the Illustrious class. This diagram highlights the engineering irony. The bespoke fleet carriers on the left were highly protected, but their architecture was rigid. Retrofitting those bespoke carriers was often prohibitive. You cannot easily cut, widen, or install angled decks through feet of hardened steel armor. But the disposable light fleet, built like a merchant ship, was essentially an empty shell. It could be sliced open, widened, and rebuilt to accept massive steam catapults and overhanging angled decks. This demonstrates a persistent rule in naval architecture. Modularity and internal volume will almost always outlive sheer tonnage and rigid armor. The 1942 stopgap warship proved that a carrier's longevity isn't found in its armor, but in its capacity to change, providing a blueprint for naval air power for decades precisely because it was built simply enough to evolve.